Good day, everybody. How you doing this week? Well, Furality's over for a few weeks. I'm done with my long article, and it's all up on Flera, and you can read it in the description, and enjoy the the long article about Furality, my experiences there, and like the different worlds and things like that. It's been a yearly thing for 3 years now, and I really enjoy making the article. I think it's a great opportunity for not only talking about Furality, but like the state of VR furry in general, and also like the changes in technology and things like that. So we cover. I won't go over the full article here verbatim. You can read it for yourself. Basically, it talks about like the different worlds, the main stage, the meet areas, the Club Fin, the hub, and the fireworks show and the dealers mall, which I talked about last. I did focus a lot on the dealers mall. I think like the dealers mall was really good this year, so I focused on it a lot. I went to every single booth, and I actually talked about like contrast, and I thought contrast was a very good theme to discuss things for the year. And so that was sort of the theme of it. The article basically, primarily for too long didn't read, basically goes over the concept of like creative uniqueness in a world of technological homogeny, where like at the end of the thing where I do the state of the fandom or state of the technology, I talk about contrast. And like the interesting thing was that there was this fish booth this year, which I have a picture of right there, that shows like this banner here was very contrasty with like all the other like colorful banners, and it stuck out. And it was like a weird sort of looked like some sort of weird trolley, sort of like weird little like eccentric sort of like booth that was like falsely selling eggs or something. But it was actually a Furality booth that the designers at Furality made, and it was part of an Easter egg hunt, which I also go over in the article. You can still kind of perform the Easter egg hunt from the Dealer's Den site on the web page for Furality. It's one of the few things they keep up for a little bit after the convention. But I go over like how like I noticed how neat that was, and I wondered like if other furries had used that sort of similar technique that they used like symbols and not words to kind of describe their booths, and I found like 6 of them during the convention, like When Snakes Sing, and the Deer Bra avatar from Nair 290, which is pictured above, and then you have the When Snakes Sing, which is the X symbol in this picture below. And then there was like 4 other examples that I had found. So that's out of the 500 booths, that was like 1% of the things. And then I go over the scavenger hunt and sort of how I kind of came to the solution, how I went about searching for it, and the solution to that. And then on the last 2 sections, which I want to primarily cover on this video, because it's like I didn't want to. The article was already getting long, and I didn't want to delve into like the state of technology in that particular element. But I did kind of go over the changings of technology and the sort of the precarious world that we're living in right now, where some of the major technological companies are really pushing for this artificial intelligence thing. And trying to homogenize our world by having the computer do the thinking for us, where, instead of like being able to learn for ourselves, to understand things for ourselves, and to be able to, in essence, create for ourselves. And, interestingly, I note how Valve sort of is stepping against that with the releases of their frame and their machine to take on Facebook/Windows sort of directly. In that essence. I talk about how like it's so fascinating to me in the way I think about the contrast of the state of the world of technology, where companies like Meta/Facebook, I'm old, I'll at least call them Facebook, like I'll always call X Twitter in some way, as sort of like you can't change what I thought of the community when you took it over. And plus, like, as a computer science major, metadata and the concept of meta is a scientific concept. It's a big thing, and like, I do not like the fact that they took that word and made it into a company name. I really don't. So I'll, usually continually call them Facebook. Because the idea is, and I think I forgot where I was going with that, but anyway, I note here that it's like I went to visit all the booths, and while I was visiting all the booths during the convention, I was thinking it's like, am I going to like do a contest and who's going to win things? And I really didn't. I kind of try to move away from that as much as possible. I did like do this section where I talked about, things that followed an interesting concept or pattern, and maybe like future booth makers might want to take into consideration using this style of banner or things like that stand out. But that was sort of brought on by the fish thing. I think that the one thing though, like there was a booth that had a video that changed my mind, and ironically, it was literally one booth down from the creator of the avatar that I'm currently wearing, Eccentrifer. And so one booth down from Eccentrifer in that section was a Astolfo booth. And in that Astolfo booth, I watched the video, and I was like, it was similar to very similar to how in, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, it's like, everyone lost. I'm just kind of like, and not everyone lost, but like, I'm not going to like, I'm not in the position to choose a winner. And then I watched the video, and I'm like, I think this one won it. Primarily because of the concept of contrast that I was talking about. Like, the narrative ended up being what I predicted in the video about the dealer's den. And to be fair, they had released the video that kind of led to me understanding what they were going to go for, narratively speaking of. This is a gaming service that's going to shut down. And that is exactly what happened. So there was a sense of nostalgia, a sense of community being lost, and sort of like, endings and sort of melancholy. And, that sense of nostalgia and longing for the past that will never come again is a very strong emotion. It is very much a very strong emotion. So when I saw the video, it very much contrasted with that feeling and that concept of like the whole convention. And by the way, this guy probably didn't have access to what the narrative of the convention was going to be, but the booth stuck out in contrast for like multiple reasons. Number one, he put the person first, and then he talked about himself. And also like, so that's a very interesting way of going about it, especially in like booths where furries are trying to sell themselves and their wares. And he's like, and he started it off in such a way where he was not trying to sell you a ware. He was trying to make you aware of what you had in front of you. And then he said, well, if you want to check my stuff out, that's great. But that was the afterthought. That was the end of the video. So it contrasted with, after viewing 500 of these booths, it was sort of very contrasting and refreshing to sort of see that kind of thing. And so what I'm going to do is we're going to watch that video in its whole. It's only a minute long. And what I'll do is we'll watch that. And then I'm going to talk about my thoughts about it, because I don't really go too much into my thoughts about his words in the video. I let him get the last word in the article because I think it's a good place to leave the article off, because it's such a strong contrast to like my concerns of the future and technology, and like where to go from here. So we're going to watch that video just now. So here we go.
Hi, I'm Astolfo. Thank you for looking in. I'm so glad that you're here. And can I say, you look great.
I don't know if you can actually hear this. Let me make sure that you can. Let's see. I don't think you probably can. So let me make sure that you can, and we'll restart that. Take two. Usually I don't have you guys listening to a video or anything. So usually I have the audio on mute. So my apologies. Here you go.
Hi, I'm Astolfo. Thank you for looking in. I'm so glad that you're here. And can I say, you look great. That is a fantastic avatar. You're killing it. Can I tell you how much I love Furality? I have been enthralled by the idea of VR ever since I first read about it in the 90s, and I have been in lots of virtual worlds since then, from furry mucks to Second Life and active worlds to finally living in a time when fully immersive VR is not only accessible to everyone, but has this thriving creator community surrounding it. I hope that you appreciate how incredible it is to live in this moment with all of these beautiful creatures that are all around you. What a privilege it is being able to inhabit a space where the creative potential of so many minds working in concert can be realized in this way. I am very grateful to be able to contribute in whatever small measure I can. If you would, I would love it if you took a look at my links, and I really hope that you have a great con.
And, for some of the astute among us, you'll notice that he said regression club and things like that. And it's very weird that the winner of a thing that is very forward looking and very sort of anti nostalgia is coming from a person who has like he seems to have regression as a sort of part of his, like, the things that he likes as a concept. Because his viewpoints on technology, is pretty progressive, and it's pretty much like, look at how cool these worlds are. Look at how cool these creators get to express themselves in these worlds in this way. And, look how cool it is that I get to not have to put on a big fluffy fursuit in the middle of summer. I instead get to wear a heavy VR mask, but it is what it is. But at the end of the day, it's much more expressive. I can do more things, and things like that. Speaking of which, this is the new sort of avatar that I'm using for sort of these videos, maybe, but obviously I still have the old one. And if you prefer that one, let me know in the comment section. As things change, people have opinions on things. Fursuits, when fursuits go to 2.0, sometimes there's some static. It's like, I always identified you as this thing. Luckily for me, it's not as expensive to change avatars as it is fursuits. So there's not much of a sunk cost fallacy if some of your old fans go, ah. But anyway, it is very refreshing to see that video. And I don't fully entirely agree with it. In some instances, the one phrase particularly I do not agree with is that VR is accessible to everyone. It's not. It's expensive still, relatively thing. It's, VR chat. Yeah, you can log into VR chat from desktop mode. Yes, you can treat it like Second Life sort of, but like there's definitely like the feeling that you're missing out on something if you do that. Whereas like Second Life or something like that, you're not missing out if you log in just using your desktop, because it is a desktop application. It's not meant to, there's not like an immersive experience that you're missing if you don't have a VR headset. And even when you have a VR headset, there's not a missing experience in like, oh, look at this person, they're in full body and they're moving their legs, and like I can't do that because all I have is like a base VR set with handles and stuff, so I can move my hands but not my head. Currently I'm not in full body, right? So I can't move anything other than my head and my hands, but I don't need to, because this is, I'm quote unquote sitting in a chair, so I don't need to have full body motion, right? So save the battery energy. So you can get a lot out of it, but like to get the most out of it, and to be quote unquote fully immersed and, feel the body as your own, you kind of have to like put up a lot of capital up front. Is it worth it? To some, it might be. I say it's like one of those things where you kind of work your way in. Like if you go to desktop mode and you see some cool people and you like chat with them and like you really like it, then it's like, okay, I could save up for a VR headset, and then you get in the VR headset, and then you get in the experience, and then like you find yourself continually using it for, at least several hours a week, right? Then at that point you might go, okay, well, is full body worth it? And it depends on what you want out of VR, and it depends on how you want to deal with your experience, right? And that's the whole thing. You have to make sure, like I think one of the biggest accidents that you can do with capital and, expenses is to throw it all at the wind and throw it all at this one thing, thinking it's going to be the thing that you really enjoy and really like and really spend a lot of time with. And then eventually, you don't. It's sort of like a false sunk cost fallacy. Like the most infamous example is like gym memberships, where it's like, hey, if I throw like $20 a month at Planet Fitness, I'm going to go to the gym because I spent $20 and I don't want to lose that $20 or make it feel like it's like exercise is work. And sometimes it's like, you know what? I paid $20, but I'm not going to the gym this month. And then you kind of might feel bad about it, but at the same time, you might not. It might be, it's only $20. And then you kind of like get into that mentality, right? Where you overestimated how much sunk cost would cost you. Another good example is like, I wanted to, like probably about 5 years ago, I'm like, I should start playing the violin again, because I did that in like grade school. And I bought like a $90 violin, and I used it like maybe once or twice. And then I was glad I only bought a $90 violin, right? Instead of like investing in like the best of the best equipment, right? Because it's like you will eventually know what you enjoy doing and enjoy doing, and you should move your expenditures in that direction, right? You should in certain financial spaces, they call that being frugal, like being generous in the things that you enjoy, and the things that the people and the things that bring you joy, and being cutthroat, frugal, and everything else, right? If you're not a foodie, don't spend a lot of money on food, right? If you're not a car guy, don't spend a lot of money on a car. You have maybe one or two things that you can spend a lot of money on, depending on how much you make, and if you're even lucky in that. And that's why I think that I think there's this false dichotomy of people who would go, well, it's like VR is accessible to everyone. It's like, even if it's accessible to you and the people who are your friends, doesn't necessarily mean it's accessible to everyone, because everyone is everyone. You have to have a very good internet infrastructure. You have to have a good electric infrastructure, which I've seen furries post on social media that don't even have that. Like their utility infrastructure is not strong enough in where they live that they can reliably be on something that is like this intensive on the internet, right? That requires this kind of connection. But I will say this, I don't hold it too much against Othello for saying that, because he does indicate in that video, it's like, you have to take a step back and look at the privilege that you have for being here at this moment. And I definitely felt that in the space for like VR chat. And VR chat as a platform, I think, is also very blessed that the furries decided that the first digital conventions that they were going to run out of their system, out of their platform, because it's interesting to me that VR chat ended up being the one that got that. It's interesting that furries never really did a sort of, convention-esque community thing in other virtual worlds. Because he listed a bunch of virtual worlds there about Second Life and other places such as that. Second Life's a big one, Furcadia, Furry Mucks. And it was a good chance to reflect on that and go like, we had access to each other, 24/7. And, we didn't have to, put up paywalls or anything like that. But it's always good to allow furries to push the boundaries of the technology that VR chat has to offer and see what they can do with it. And it's interesting enough where it's like, it's definitely worth it to me to, to pay and to sort of take time off, actually. Like, I treat it like a full-blown con. I put everything aside for the weekend so that I can go to it, because I think it's worth it as an experience, because I want to explore as much as I can and get not the sunk cost fallacy of getting the most out of it, because I know I'm going to miss things. I'm going to miss things. So it's like, what is important to you? And I think that it's so wonderful, and I'm very thankful for the Furality community and all the headaches they probably deal with on that weekend, because they are working, and they worked really hard this year. And I really look forward to what the next theme is in the next year. Because I'll be honest, like when they said gaming was the theme, I was a little bit wary. I was a little bit like, yeah, I don't see what you can really do with that theme, but they really knocked it out of the park. The usage of drones, I guess is one of the big ones. Like in not only the fireworks show, which is where and I noticed them before the show even started for the first time, because I do that where I look around and take a look, and like there's like, if you like, I got to the edge of the little spaceship thing and I look down and there's a bunch of like little like dots and they're all like aligned. And I'm like, oh, they're gonna do drones, because I know drones were kind of becoming a big thing in fireworks shows around the world. I haven't seen a drone show in person myself, so ironically, I've seen a drone show in the virtual world before I've seen it in the real world, but I have seen them on video, and I always found them interesting, and so they were able to combine the fireworks show with a drone show, which is usually something you don't see in the real world, as I joked, because those two things usually don't play together. You know, it's like launch the flat cannons at the drones. Oh no, drone down, drone down. Like, you don't do that. You don't combine those two things because of that, right? So I always found, it was very interesting to see those two elements, particularly the rock band with the guitar and like the explosions. It was very cool. But not only did they use it there, they used it at the club, the Fin Club. And they made, like, the Fin Club is so cool. I don't like the mall. I think it's a big improvement on the medium. I do not know how they can improve it even further, but it was very immersive. There were like, it was very much like each set was its own sort of show that was like equivalent, if not like better than the fireworks show sometimes, where it's like there's these sets and like the dance floor was very plain, and I was kind of worried about it when I first saw it, but then I followed the first set and I'm like, I see why they made the dance floor itself very plain, because the lights and the sort of 3D interactive or like not interactive elements, but 3D elements that sort of pop up during the show and like in the flare, like, is the thing that people should be paying attention to, and any flourish that they put on the main stage, on the main dance floor, would have distracted from that. So I see exactly that was the right decision. It was very cool. There was like 3D elements where it's like there's a tree in the middle of the dance floor and you can walk around it, and there was like little two NPCs that were walking around it. There was like a ship that flew up above the bow of, because you were on a spaceship. The club is a spaceship basically, and then, like another enemy ship would fly up above the bow, and there'd be like a reticle on the dance floor, and it would like flash off pyrotechnics at the reticle. So if you can dance around it or jump away from it if it attacked you. It was really cool. Everybody did something very different with their sets, and it made for a very variety of an experience, and everyone had their own interpretation of it. And I felt like last year, when I think about the club last year, it felt like the dance floor itself was very interesting and very like colorful, and also very like they had like a little water pool where you would splash a bit because it was a bird bath, and they had like a sort of bird video screen, but it was very a flat experience, and a lot of the sets worked into the world and sort of was kind of forced to utilize it. Whereas this experience was more like, it felt like the performer was the one in control of the set, and even though it was on a spaceship and like it was sort of like some contact off the bow, and it's sort of like, like in Star Trek where they would go like on screen and then you'd have a person in front of them on screen. It would be sort of like that. You're sort of having this sort of close encounter with this other species, and they're projecting lights, and like sometimes they're hostile. One of them was really hostile, and very flashy. There was only like one set like that I recall, that was very infamous, and it was like very loud and very like fork in the garbage disposal, like very loud. But other than that, and very flashbangy. There was only one that was like that. Every other one was very tasteful, did didn't go push things too far too fast. They were very respectful of the dancers, and you know, it's like, and the reason I write these articles is because words can't really do them justice, and so like it needs like photos, it needs things to go with it, and it needs to be, in my mind, preserved a little bit, because like these worlds only last once, and that adds to like an interesting experience of like, as time goes on, people will think about the past, and I don't even know what the future will bring. I like, how long will VR chat last? Will there be another big platform that takes on things to a whole other level, and will furries start making other sort of gatherings like Furality in other virtual platforms, as things continue to grow? So I guess the thing I should end with, which is the thing I should have probably started with, is that as far as the numbers go, like the $116,000 ish was donated for a LGBTQ run rescue service in Seattle, and that was wonderful. It was called the Resilient Hearts, I believe it was called. And it was a wonderful charity. The opening ceremonies went over introducing the charity, the rescue runner, like getting immersed into VR for the first time, and their experiences with that. And it's always very interesting to see people have their first virtual experience like that. Which is sort of when we were introduced to sort of the surround sound also in the things. It was hit or miss with so the main events had sort of a surround sound thing going on. Some of the people I was with were like, I wish there was a way to turn that off. To me, it was like, it wasn't too bad. They didn't overutilize it. It was a little weird not knowing that was going to be a thing where it's like it sounds like somebody's talking behind you, but it's actually part of the video audio, and they're kind of doing a surround sound thing. Because you were thinking about, it's like, oh, is somebody talking back there? Do I have to mute somebody? And it's like, oh, no, it's just the video. There was no option to really turn that off. I liked it. Even though some folks had asked for if there was, I didn't see any. But that being said, very much, I go over more information in the article, and I think that's it. And so the last thing is that there was an increase of attendance by about 1,000 attendees this year. We're in like obviously it's the largest furry gathering, but it's not the largest furry I don't call it the largest furry convention, because conventions have like a lot more logistics involved, and it's not really fair to compare apples and oranges like that. Furality obviously is a worldwide convention, or worldwide gathering that's taking place on an internet platform, which gives it a lot of advantages for more access to more furries. And like, so it's, as I said in the first year that I did the first article, it's not really a fair comparison. I will note that the growth between this year and last year did stymie a bit from the year before that. So like the growth is sort of tempering. Now, is it because of the economy? It could be. It could be that like people aren't buying, like the VR, maybe the people in VR are getting a little saturated. It's like the people who enjoy VR and are in VR are in there. And like there's sort of the growth curve is sort of tapering off like a logarithmic function, instead of like an exponential function. Like it's stymieing off. But I think the bigger reason, and I know at least one person I know wasn't able to attend because they couldn't get their ID on time. Like they were trying to, get an ID, like replace their ID that they had lost or misplaced, and they couldn't get it on time. But like you were required to, give identity, and you were required to be 18 plus in order to attend this year, which is it's the first time that has been a thing. And because of that, I think that is what basically stymied the growth. We probably lost a few people who last year attended without having the 18 things. But this year, we might have gained some, but we might have lost some. And so like, I think that was the big reason for the flattening of the curve this year. I would say, like, obviously the whole thing would be is like, as VR becomes more affordable, but as we know right now, and this is something I went over in the article, that's not guaranteed. So it's as I said, it's between tariffs and RAM prices and all this other stuff working against the costs of things and the cost of living in itself, right? The baseline of just living in this world and surviving in this world is getting higher and higher, and then having these like exuberant electronics on top of it is becoming even much harder. So, and on top of that, with the expenses of those electronics going up and up, it becomes harder to justify at times. So it is going to be, I think, the growth in the space of VR is very, very finicky, is the word for it. If the goal, as Estrofo said, as the otter in the earlier part of this video said, is that VR being accessible to everybody, it's going to be very challenging going forward, as it's the disparity between people who have and have not continue this quote unquote K-shaped recovery, where people who have get more and the people who don't have try to deal with having less, and it's going to be a challenge to make it more accessible to more people. And I'll go. You can tell I'm kind of doing this impromptu on a Saturday night. The one last thing I'll say is that I also kind of don't agree that VR chat is accessible to everybody, even if you can get on it and even if you have a VR set. And what I mean by accessible, meaning VR chat is a chat program. It is a vocal chatting program. It is very like animus to writing, right? It actually limits you to a degree that I think frustrates people when they first experience it, because even just to go, like, you're going between these instances in these worlds to join with your friends and things, and you can't like type to them in the program. You can like type a small line going, hey, can I join your thing? Like, I replace one of them with, good day, I'd like to join if I may. Like, and you send that to them and they send it to you and you go there and you talk. So for people who are like non-verbose, or maybe even mute, or maybe like can't, are not very charismatic, VR chat itself can be very much a wall. Even regardless of VR versus desktop, just written word versus spoken word. Like, if you think about it, if you think about the other programs such as Second Life, or if you think of things such as Second Life, or Furry Mucks, right? Like, it was sort of a thing back then that people used written chat programs because text is the most dense way to send information over things. So it's the most information cost-effective way to send information from one place to another, is using that instead of using pictures. And then eventually pictures became reasonable, and then eventually videos became reasonable, and now 3D models is in some regards reasonable to things, and spoken real-time dialogue of like tens of people talking at once is reasonable. And because we live in that world, people who, once again, like people who are charismatic, who already have an advantage in the real world, all of a sudden have an advantage in the virtual world too. And I think there are definitely some furries who are left behind on that. Luckily for myself, I made this video back in 2017, the very first one I made, saying like one of the big things about running this channel was to get used to talking in real time and getting used to, saying my thoughts clearly and effectively without too much pre-scripting, but writing it in my head and speaking it out loud. And that has helped me transition into VR chat. If I did not do that, and I just focused on writing, I would be at a detriment on a platform like this. And I think many furries who are writers and not speakers find themselves at a disadvantage. And to them, I would say the words of George Carlin, which I think are the most important, is that George Carlin saw himself as a writer who performed his own material. In other words, the writing comes first. You think about what you would write, and then you speak in that same manner, right? And that helps you with your charisma. Ironically, that's my favorite George Carlin quote. A lot of people who quote George Carlin would quote other things about comedy and things like that. But that's my favorite quote of his because it actually really does transfer well to other means and other things. And even when you're talking about nonfiction or talking about furry or talking about things that you enjoy writing about, thinking about how you write about it and that's how you would speak about it can help you become more charismatic through your writing rather than thinking of them as two separate things that can never be connected. So to those, I would think that would be it. I definitely do have furries who I knew on Second Life, who I do know are on VR chat, and they will sometimes ask me on VR chat, it's like, I haven't seen you on Second Life in a while, and are you ever going to go back on Second Life? And I think they feel that way because Second Life allows for a more cerebral experiences into things that they enjoy, like written RP, pose balls, so they don't have to like move or pantomime, because talking is somewhat labor intensive. It's a very quick way of getting things out to people, and now we have sort of real time transcripting that's sort of okay. Like it's not that bad. It's a very quick it's a quick and lazy way of getting information out to people, whereas writing is a little more cerebral and intensive. But I'm glad I have both, because the written word is easier to disseminate and it's easier for the reader to pick up on things. Like, it's a lot of effort to create, but it's a lot easier for the person who is basically trying to disseminate information. A video is not a great place to do that. But now I'm kind of going off on a tangent. Long of the short is, like, VR is accessible. It's going to not always be accessible to everyone. One more example. Damn it! I saw a person on social media called Bandit who actually has. They only have one leg. In real life. And so when they're doing full body tracking, like, it can be challenging because the trackers don't understand that the person has only one leg, right? Very much the mathematical formulas and things like that for full body tracking and things like that very much think of like the person has a head, the person has two hands, the person has 2 feet. But in the real world, that might not be the case, right? A person could have one leg, right? And then how do they track that one leg and the one leg's motion without it getting confused about like that the person only has one leg, right? And how are you gonna have to have a specialized avatar for something like that? So like the concept of accessibility is a good one. I think it's an interesting one. I think that in the future it'll be seeing how it does become more accessible. There's one person also that I know who I've seen in person who also, is deaf, and they use voice to chat. And I think one of the challenges of using VR chat, and they still use it despite the challenges, is when people are cross-talking, because like obviously because they don't have hearing, they'll have something that sort of like takes the audio and translates it into text for them to read. But when like people are cross-talking and talking at the same time, like it's probably like a lot of noise. I don't know how that works, but it's probably a challenge in that regard. So it is there is definitely strengths and weaknesses to it. And we can talk for a long time on that. And you guys have been here long enough. It's been 40 minutes. I think that's enough for 1 year. I really do look forward to seeing what happens next year, and I hope you enjoy reading the article, and I hope you enjoyed listening to the video. Hopefully you got something out of it, and we'll see you next time for the next video. Let me know what you think of the new avatar. If you want me to change back, I can change back. I think the other one's a little bit more expressive in some regards. I like this one in certain regards. I'm just trying things out and seeing what sticks. Have a good one, everyone.